Hi everyone. So we're going to be looking at Pyramids by Frank Ocean. This is a song that I've liked for a long time, and it provides an intense narrative that goes from chaos to calm and covers a lot of different values and rhetorical strategies within its narrative that create just a beautiful story. Over, almost 10 minutes long in this song. So we're going to get into that. A little background on Frank Ocean. This was his first album that was completely all new songwriting. And so this album really kickstarted, his career, got him a lot of traction and popularity. And this really highlights his skill as a story writer. And so the themes we're seeing here include kind of this cycle of human desire and the deconstruction of value and how we assign value to people and structures, and more specifically, why do women continue to lose value over time? And we see this throughout history, and then now even into the present day, we can relate this sort of theme that continues to happen to women. And so this narrative kind of weaves throughout the past and present through history and modern day, where Frank works as a storyteller. And the narrative is shifting, not only within him, who's playing different roles of, we'll see, a pharaoh and a thief as well as another man. And this creates fluidity in identity. And then we're also seeing a narrative shift throughout the historical timeline and into the modern day. And so we start out, we're talking a lot about Cleopatra in this song, and she's representing power and desire. And this is kind of an extended metaphor, which is comparing Cleopatra and a stripper. And this metaphor functions as allegory of how Black women and power and beauty and labor exploitations and the idea of manipulation throughout history, combining the glamour and the tragedy of women being worshipped and now into being objectified. So Cleopatra, she was a ruler in Egypt from 70 BC to 30 BC. And at the time, she didn't have a pharaoh by her side. She was just a queen. And Frank Ocean mentions a pharaoh in this song, which would imply that there's another person involved. And Cleopatra goes missing. The pharaoh sends out cheetahs. It says, set the cheetahs on the loose. There's a thief on the loose. And he says to do it for my glory. So Cleopatra has gone missing, and this, the for my glory line itself, these are Greek words, kleos and patra, that literally translate to glory of the Father. So this is kind of implying that there's a ruler with a reputation on the line that is going to be tainted since Cleopatra has gone missing. Now, what we figure out is that this thief has convinced her to run away with him for a better life. And, the pharaoh is thinking that Cleopatra's been kidnapped. She's been stolen. But now it'll later be found out that she did this willingly. And so people of the time, in Cleopatra's history, they likely married within the family. So it was possible that she was married to her brothers and wanted to get away with that, or get away from that. So this led her, in actual history, to have affairs with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. These were both Roman generals, and they kind of wanted Egypt as their own territory. So this could imply, an affair that kind of promotes the idea of the thief. And these rulers or other men, they want Cleopatra for what she has and are manipulating her into thinking they can provide her a better life when really they just want to use her. So this, we get into the line of what good is a jewel that ain't still precious. And so this is implying that Cleopatra has ruined her reputation. She's no longer precious because she's had an affair. She's run away. She hasn't just been kidnapped. And Frank Ocean goes on to say, how could you run off on me? How could you run off on us? You feel like God inside that gold. So she went for the money. She went thinking that this is going to get her a higher status, when in the long run, it's really these men that are looking for more power. and using Cleopatra to do so. So then we get into a line, I found you laying down with Samson and his head full of hair. And this is two different times in history, Samson and Cleopatra. So Frank Ocean deliberately matched these two. And this line itself is, if you know the story of Samson, Delilah kind of manipulated him and cut his hair and stole his power. So this is implying that Samson still had his hair and is going to be manipulated. His power is going to be taken by Cleopatra or Delilah, but implying that the new man who is taking Cleopatra is only in for it. He's got it coming. And this intertextuality, this intertwines the Bible and history and modern day storylines. This historical references, they kind of build Frank's credibility and depth, and it broadens the audience for those who might be interested in history, as well as those who are more interested in the modern day, like nightlife and that sort of narrative. And this builds ethos within the song. So deceit is a central theme here, and implying that women are being deceitful in Frank Ocean's life. And, you know, since we know of Cleopatra's track record with Mark Antony, Julius Caesar, this is how we know that Samson, or the current man, will face betrayal. And so then we continue to hear the line cheetahs, like set the cheetahs on the loose. But now we're kind of switching into different meanings where the cheetahs are kind of implying a cheater or Cleopatra as a cheater. And then we see that Cleopatra in the song dies. And so she essentially, or the man, it's kind of open to interpretation, someone has ruined the relationship. This is the death of a relationship. And so now we're kind of transitioning. In the music video, Frank, he wakes up and it was kind of all a dream. We hear this techno music transition that moves us from the historical to the present day. And this music, it makes the listener feel the narrative shift and illustrates that fall or transfer of power. He goes on to talk about this big sun being filtered by motel blinds. And this is kind of discussing Cleopatra's greatness being degraded or filtered out or seen in a different light because of what she's done. And we're going to see that this woman that Frank is talking about, her power and the idea of her is now being filtered or viewed in a different light because she's going to work at these pyramids, which hint at a strip club in Vegas. So in part one, you know, we're looking at mythological themes, intense imagery of pyramids, rulers, power, wealth, or the illusion of wealth. We're talking about a black queen, Cleopatra, and this kind of defines the beauty throughout eras, the fine line between worship and objectification. And then in part two, we're moving into a slower, more intimate shift. You know, this kind of signals that shift across time, yet it's still the same cycle of that endless desire for power, whether that's women or men. We're all trying to chase something that isn't necessarily guaranteed. And so the imagery we're seeing here is a motel and a strip club, and more so the illusion of wealth built upon performance rather than concrete. So now we've woken up in Vegas, and the pimp, we've got three characters here, right? We've discussed the pharaoh, we've discussed the thief, and now we're kind of looking at this pimp. And the pimp woke up next to this girl. He calls her Cleopatra. She's the stripper, and she works at the pyramid. So this is referencing actually a club or hotel in Vegas, the Luxor, which has a giant black pyramid structure. And we can see that in the background of the singles, like art, the cover of the single of the song. You can see that there's a big black pyramid in the background of the window. So, you know, we see the prestige of pyramids then being kind of degraded themselves into a strip club. Cleopatra goes from a queen to a stripper, and this is emphasizing pathos and empathy for both women and these men being manipulated in different ways. this also, using the stripper as Cleopatra, using that as her name, kind of elevates the stripper's status to thinking of her as a queen. And this gets the audience to rethink their power and rethink the idea of a stripper. So then, Frank Ocean, he's kind of creating this idea of living lavish, but if you listen, he's talking about, top floor motel suite. Top floor of a motel isn't anything nice. He's talking about pimping. And so it's kind of this illusion of power and where our priorities lie. So now, we're still talking about the pimp. He says, got your girl working for me. And so he's got these feelings for Cleopatra, but he knows that there's another guy out there. And so both the women, the stripper and Cleopatra, both left their partners for a higher position and wealth, and the men kind of know this. So this other man, this is probably the stripper's actual boyfriend. They've been dating, and she starts working at this club. It's implying that this man is unemployed and is relying on Cleopatra to, provide for him. And this kind of creates a power shift because we don't know. He's starting to feel insecure that she's getting all this attention from other guys. And he's even saying, but your love ain't free no more. So he realizes that, there's other people out there getting this attention, and he's going to have to pay one way or another. And his delivery of this kind of mimics the plot. You can definitely sense a vibe change where it goes from upbeat and energetic to now kind of self-reflecting and a bit more deep and personal. So with all this, there's still a lot of room for interpretation, and there's vague details in areas where we don't really know who he's referring to as Cleopatra. We know it's a stripper, but is she being exploited, or is she being empowered? Did she do this willingly, or was she manipulated into doing so? And then there's also different viewpoints from the roles of the narrator. We have the pharaoh, the thief, the pimp, and then, just a lover. And this creates a universal message through these different perspectives and creates something that the audience can relate to one way or another. They can probably find relatability within one of these characters. So, revolving themes, we've got bad decisions with desire and love and relationships, and we've all faced how this can be effective or affecting people within their relationships. And, there's intent to show off her own personal status, yet also these men trying to show off their status, where they're referring to Cleopatra as a gem, where, that's beauty, that's purity. However, then she goes on to kind of taint her reputation, and these men are referring to her as a gem because they just want her for her possessions. And so, the pimp needs her. It says that he, needs Cleopatra to keep his bills paid. So they're all looking for her money. And then this third guy actually loves her, but is desired, he still wants some sort of power within the relationship. And he's kind of praising her body rather than what she really has to bring to the table. And now that there's this job and a potentially tainted reputation, he's kind of hesitant and insecure. But he lets her do it. He lets her make her own choices, but he's realizing the things that he's going to have to sit within that. So this overall is kind of just discussing the pursuit of power and control in any and all positions within this storyline. They all lead to an end. None of it ends up, like a fairy tale. This is all kind of real issues that we've seen throughout history. It's the lack of love in modern relationships and even there in history. And in one of the videos I watched, it kind of compared this to the modern day Bohemian Rhapsody, where we're going through such an intense narrative and storyline, and yet it combines, rap and melodic music and combines it all through this storyline and just creates so much imagery. So yeah, that's my rhetorical analysis of Frank Ocean's Pyramids. I recommend you listen to the song if you get the chance, and thank you.